everyone. My name is Dr. Heather Hatch, as most of you probably already know, and I'm the collections manager here at the Museum of Ontario Archaeology. And I'm actually joining you today from just outside the museum. You can see our building here. So this is our collections wing, formerly known as Sustainable Archaeology. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about, and I'm going to be showing you, our flotation machine. So flotation is something I think I've talked about in some of my previous talks. And what it is basically it's washing dirt. And the purpose of it is to capture the kinds of artifacts that we might not be able to see visually when we're excavating because they're too small to be caught by the naked eye. And so the idea is that a lot of these small particles, things like seeds, very small bones, even like beads, like just very tiny things, are light enough that they will float in water. So we want to separate a sample of that's taken from an archaeological unit during excavation, just to make sure that we're getting a sample of these kinds of small things that might be lost when we're just doing general screening through wider mesh. So most archaeological material is screened through a mesh that's a 1/4 inch wide, so it's pretty small, but it's not like super tiny. You can screen things through smaller mesh to catch smaller particles. With flotation, it's really quite a very fine, like microns level mesh that things are being screened through. So we catch quite a lot of material this way that we can then use for more complicated analyses like archaeobotanical analysis to sort of get, again, that broader profile of what's actually going on at this site, other than just what we're able to see with the naked eye. So the material that I'm using for my demo today is actually some really old soil samples that were collected by the museum literally decades ago. So these have been waiting to be processed for quite some time, and in the past couple of summers we had a volunteer who had been running through a lot of this work for us, sort of getting us caught up on some of this backlog. But I thought it would be a good example, good test materials today. So this is actually from the Rife site. It was excavated in 1975. And we've got really just a bunch of small samples. Now today it's actually mandated in the standards and guidelines that when you're doing archaeological work that you actually have to collect material for flotation, just to make sure that this kind of material is being caught. So we have this machine here on site at the museum, and we actually have a lot of CRM companies who will come to use our machine to take care of the flotation that they're required to do for their reports. So it's probably one of our most heavily used pieces of equipment, especially of our rental equipment. So it's pretty neat, but it's basically a dirt washer. So I'm going to walk you through some of the process of what we start with and how we go through all these different stages to get what we call our light fraction, which is that stuff that's going to float up on top, and then the heavy fraction, which is going to settle down to the bottom. Now, very, very rarely, like if you're very lucky, you might find some actual artifacts in your flotation sample. This happened to us one time last summer. I was demoing the machine for some students who were processing some material for us, and we actually found a whole projectile point in the heavy fraction. I don't think that's going to happen today, but it could. So let's find out. So I'm just going to show you what we're working with. So in this case, the samples we have are very small. They're not very large. A lot of the samples that we see come in from CRM are like, bucketfuls of material from the same unit, or even multiple buckets in some cases. So this is really quite tiny, but it will serve for our purposes. So this is what it looks like before it's processed. In this case, it's double bagged. There's an old tag in here with some information on it that's telling us where it came from in the site, giving us a little bit of context about the soil, about the soil itself, who excavated it, and some basic information about what this material that's in this bag is. So rather than start with this dry material, especially again since it's been sitting for so long, what I've done is I've pre-soaked it. So just give me a minute here. And so instead I have this little baggie of mud. And that's just to give it a chance to sort of saturate into that, especially again that old, really hard, dried out dirt. And people do this anyway, especially if you have something like clay. It's very dense and heavy. It's hard to run through. It's hard to break up that material just using the machine itself. So pre-soaking it gives you sort of a little bit of an edge, makes it go a little bit faster, makes it go a little easier. It also means that you're less likely to have just big chunks of dirt that settle at the bottom and don't get washed and don't get broken up. So this is, just a little tip. And again, it's just just again, a very small sample in this particular case. So what we do is we want to make sure that we're ready to collect the material as it comes out. So this is my screen here, and you can see I've got this really fine mesh on top of it that's clipped to this larger screen. And this is what all of our fine material is gonna catch in. And this is actually silk screening mesh, so it's very, very fine. And it catches a lot of very tiny particles, essentially. And so this will get set into the machine. And I'm just gonna shift your perspective here now that I've given you a bit of an introduction, and we're gonna focus on the machine itself. Before I go any further, before I forget again, I also wanted to let people know that this is actually going to be our last Thursday MOA Live Talk, and actually the last of our MOA Live Talk series as it exists currently. So starting next week, we're going to be cutting down to just one day a week for the live presentations, or for these presentations where we're giving you a little bit more in-depth content, talking a little bit about what we're doing behind the scenes and the kind of work that we're doing at the museum. We're actually going to be coming up with a whole new hashtag to communicate what we're doing. Now that we're able to be back on site, we can present different kinds of information and show you different kinds of things. And so that's where we're hoping to go moving forward. Just to sort of give it that separation, we're going to come up with a new name. We're thinking maybe something like Behind the Screens. I'm behind the screen. You're behind the screen. All these archaeology screens. But if you have better suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. And as ever, if you have questions about what I'm doing, please feel free to ask, and I should be able to see them on my phone, although I am about to rotate my perspective, which might make it a little bit more complicated. So, here we go. This is our flotation machine. It's a Float Tech. They actually, I don't think, make them anymore. It's got my screen setting on top of it, and I'm just going to move back here so you can see a little bit more again. So this is the screen, and it's going to sit down in this section here. So it sits underneath here. And so what I've got is this bin here has got another screen at the bottom of it, which I don't think you can see. And so this is full, this whole tub here, this whole section is full of water. And what's going to happen when I turn on the machine is I'm going to put my sample into this bin here, and the water is going to rise, and it's going to start pulling apart some of the dirt that's in there and bringing anything that's lighter up to the top, and then that's going to push it. I'm going to take this out of here. Once it gets broken up, once it has a chance to agitate, there's a function I can turn on, and I probably will, just to show you how it works, where it aerates the water even more to help break up anything that's in there. And then I'll remove this partition, and it will start to overflow from this section here where it's full of water into this part here where it will catch all that material in the screen. And what I'll be left with is all the heavier material in the bottom of this screen, and all the lighter fraction, all that, the seeds, fine bones, anything like that. Charcoal is one thing we catch quite a lot in these screens. Will get caught in this mesh, this very fine mesh here. And then I'll move them over to the side. So, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's finished. So I'm going to start up my machine so you can see what it is. There's just literally just an on button over here on this side. So I'm just going to flip that on. So hopefully you'll be able to hear me still over the water. You can sort of see the water is starting to rise already. So you can see how it's coming up, and then it's just going to push over here. So that's just to show you. And now I will add my actual sample. So I've got the original tag for this bag here that's just in a plastic bag that it came in. It was double bagged, and I just kept it together. And we want to make sure that we keep this original information, and then it doesn't get separated from our two sections. So over back here, which I'm not sure if you can see, I've got a tray here prepared that's got some newspaper on it, so it will help things dry a little bit more quickly. It's got a rock so I can weight this down because those screens are very, very light. It's a little bit windy out here. And this is where my sample is going to end up going. So for now, I'm just going to put my tag here, so again, it doesn't get separated from that sample. In it goes. I'm just going to tear it open here because I don't trust the plastic to really maintain its structural integrity. I'm just going to wash everything out, turn the bag right inside out so that there's nothing left inside it. into the water that's in this bin. And you might already be able to see, I'm not sure, it might be too dark, but there's already some little bits of charcoal, it looks like, floating on the top of this water. We'll see it as it comes up. All right, I'm gonna turn it back on now, and we'll just watch as it sort of raises up, and then I'll tell you when I turn on the aeration again so we can see it bubble a little bit more directly. Things are threatening to blow away on me. So I'll turn it on now. So hopefully you can see the water is rising. So it's about here now, it's rising up. We've got some material here. I'll just scratch some of it. So we've got some chunks of charcoal, for example, that are floating to the top. I'm actually going to turn on the aeration I was telling you about, so there's hoses in here that will make some more extra bubbles. Working properly. You can see them bubbling over here and around here, maybe. And you can see it's already spilling over into here and it's catching some of those particles. So I'm going to take this screen out. Wash off everything so it's not getting caught on here. And then away it goes, over the edge and into our screen. Now I'm going to take my trowel down here and I'm going to take my hand at first. Just make sure that everything that's down in here has gotten broken up well. We want to make sure, there's a few more things that are coming up now. We want to make sure that everything light is really getting washed out. In here is like little bits of gravel, there might be like some bigger rocks. It really depends on what was in the sample initially. All right, so you can see over here, we've got some material collecting in the screen back here. You can see, if not, I'll show you in a minute. So now that we've turned it off, the water's gonna go back down. It's gonna sink back down here, and we'll just make sure everything from the top has been washed over. There, and you can see here we've got all this material, mostly charcoal in this context, and so I know from the description on the tag that a lot of the soil that this was collected from was actually pretty ashy, so that makes sense that there's quite a lot of charcoal. And then this could be used to, for example, look at the wood samples or the types of wood that might have been burned at this site. So I'm going to take this out, just unclip the mesh here. Just have our ED is coming in just on the other side of the camera, so just walking into the building. All right, so now I've got this folded up, so I'm not going to lose any of the material, and I'm just going to put it over here and weight it down with a rock. So then I've got all of this water still in here, and this is slowly sinking down, and what it's leaving me is all this heavier material, so gravel and so forth, bigger chunks, things that just aren't as light, are settling down to the bottom of this screen. And so once that's finished settling, once the water has all receded and it's basically flowed back over, there's a pipe that connects these two sections, and so now that it's not being pumped up in here, it's just flowing back over this way. I think I'll back over here, you'll be able to see me better. So it's just going to settle down, flow back into here, and then we can collect any of that heavy material, and we're just going to scrape it out onto the tray, the same tray that this one is sitting on, so that again we're not losing the context between stuff that's in that light fraction that's folded up in that screen and the stuff that is in this heavy fraction here. So we'll keep it together, and that way we'll know that everything on that tray came from the same unit that's associated with the tag. And so again, a lot of the times companies that are using this machine have a lot higher volume. It takes it longer to wash through, and there's a lot more material that's collected as well. So they might not be able to fit everything on a single tray, but they've all got their own processes. Also to do the same thing where they're keeping track of where things came from. So there's a lot of like neat little aspects to this machine. It's actually pretty well designed for what it does, washing dirt. So it's got a pump that pumps water through. It's got those aeration hoses that help break things up. And it's actually got over here, which I might be able to just turn this over here. On this side over here, what this actually is a pump that helps pump out all of the water that is in this bottom section when it starts to get really dirty. So as you can imagine, the more you're washing dirt, the more just sand and other soil particles. It's gonna bring you back up here so I don't have to keep leaning over. But the more soil particles and just dirt that gets into that water, and so you're going to want to replace the water that's in your machine so that it stays clean. And so you can just pump that out, pump it into a bucket, let the bucket settle, because usually if people are doing this, they're doing like they're out here all day going through different soil samples. And so just let that water in the bucket settle so all the dirt sinks to the bottom, and then you've got clean water on top. You can use that to refill your machine and do a little bit of recycling rather than fill up this whole thing with fresh water every time. And then you can just dispose of your dirt. We want to make sure that we're not putting it in an area that's going to cause problems for drainage over here, which has been an issue in the past, but also just make sure that it's not just being dumped somewhere where it's going to be a problem or whatever. So we just want to make sure we're disposing of it safely, essentially. So in this case, I think we've got it's still got a little bit of water in here. So I'm just waiting, hopefully soon, we'll be able to just clean this out. But just to give you an idea, I'll just pick some up with my trowel. Try and pick some up with my trowel. It's harder when it's underwater still. So really mostly what we've got is like little bits of gravel in here. So I don't know how well you can see that there, but there's just like the kinds of little tiny rocks you find in almost any kind of dirt is mostly what's left in our sample here. We have this. We have one little flake. I don't know if you can see that on my thumb or not. We've got one nice little tiny flake, and this is the kind of thing that you might not see if you're excavating. So it's nice that we caught it in this particular context. It's a nice little, I'm going to call it a retouch flake. I'm not an expert in lithics, but I'm guessing the sort of thing that you might chip off the edge of something when you're resharpening it, for example. So this is kind of, there's our artifact of the day. You've got a little piece here of some kind of bone in here, but mostly it's just rock. So what would happen next is that somebody would go through and sort out everything in the heavy sample by material. So pull out all the pieces of bone they can find, pull out any of these little tiny flakes that they might come across. And the same with the light sample. So separate the charcoal, for example, separate any seeds, any tiny little artifacts. Again, like sometimes you get like fish bones, for example, will float. And you'll find those in flotation. They can be hard to see with the naked eye. Or like seed beads, very tiny, like a quarter the size of your pinky nail or smaller beads sometimes. And we'll just separate all these different things so we can get a better sense of what's in our particular sample. So I'm just going to pull things together here, get it out of the corners of the screen so that as the water settles out more, I can put it into the tray. I think rather than continuing to wait for this, because it's being slow for us, I'm just going to show you my finished product, just like we're in a cooking show. Pull the finished one out of the oven. So this is the one I had from before. So again, we've got just like dirt and junk here. So again, this one I didn't have a chance to pre-soak. So we've got more just still pieces of dirt in here, unfortunately. But then we've just got like small rocks and stuff. And then we've got our finished flotation in this screen here so it can dry out, and our tag here as well to keep track of where it came from. So that's the gist of flotation. Hopefully that was interesting. Like I said, this machine can handle quite a lot larger volume than what we were working with in this particular example. But it is, you know, it's kind of a fun thing to do on a hot afternoon. So thank you for joining me. And again, just a reminder, we're going to be moving these presentations back to Tuesdays only. And also, we're going to be sort of shifting the focus to more of this kind of thing. Less of a formal presentation or lecture, and more of a behind the scenes, or a chance to see the kind of work that we're going through at the museum. So thank you for joining us. I hope to see you guys, have some of you join us or catch our video next Tuesday as well. And I hope that you have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.